And welcome to the React Show. I am super excited today. This is one of my favorite topics. I have been wanting to talk about this forever. So what are we talking about? We're going to talk about bottom-up programming and how that can help you be a happier and better programmer. I know it sounds hard to believe, but I think it's true, and I think it's what we all want. So yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're with Owl Creek, a high-performance React consultancy. I'm your host, Thomas, with my co-host, Austin. Hi, Austin. Welcome to the
Hello.
show. Yeah, so if you have any feedback or questions about the podcast, please send them to the React Show at owlcreek.studio. We'd absolutely love to hear from you. Um, yeah, um, so actually, the show notes for this I was preparing on the airplane, and I don't know if I got sort of bored or whatever, but I even drew some drawings about bottom up programming. So I don't know if you probably can't see them here with my focusing or whatever very well. But anyways, I don't know. Maybe there's some way we can figure out how to get into the podcast distribution or something. I don't want to make any promises, and they're not very good. So, but if it's useful, I don't know. We might talk about it more later. Anyways, yeah. So I don't know. I was so excited. I made a drawing. uh,
We'll send it over to the art department after and get some graphics up, yeah?
oh, that would be excellent. Yes, let's do that. Put that on their docket for this next week.
Indeed.
Yeah. So yeah, this is, like I said earlier, one of my favorite topics. And my original working title for this, which I could not publish because I knew I wouldn't click on it. But anyways, the one magic thing that will transform your engineering career. But I kind of believe it's true. Yeah. So we're gonna talk about it. I know I'm really hyping this up, but I think it's worth it. So yeah, let's.
Yeah, I haven't heard you this excited about anything.
I know. Well, I'm trying to be more excited, too. So let's see how it
No,
goes.
it's great. It's great. I'm like, dude, tell me what is this all about? Come on.
It's what happens when you go on vacation. I don't know.
Note taken.
Yeah, yeah. So, it's actually also come up. Austin and I have talked about this. I've talked with this to other people, and recently, sort of a new friend I have who is, talking to me about how they were getting blocked, in their programming, where they're like, I just keep running into these mental blocks, and I don't really know what to do next. I don't and I'm like, oh, I totally get that. I have run into that many times, and I'm sure Austin has.
Well, when you said getting blocked, I was like, getting blocked by backend resources maybe?
No.
No, but definitely getting blocked mentally, it happens every day, multiple times a day, especially if you're yeah, it's something we all face, and there's a lot of ways to overcome it. So how does bottom up programming do that?
I mean, yeah. So I used to get really blocked a lot. I almost never get blocked anymore, and I attribute most of it to bottom up programming approach. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is how that works, how it can make your life better. Like I remember I used to, just be like sitting there staring at the code, and like I'm like, oh God, there's like all these like different pieces working together, and I can't, like, if I change this, it does this, or I don't know what happens if and I just would get all in my head about it, and it was really frustrating. And I know a lot of other programmers have had the same thing. And so I've worked over the years to try to figure out, how do we get around this? How do we make this not a thing? And there are, like Austin said, multiple factors. But for me, the biggest change was changing my entire approach to programming. And so that's where we're going to start, which is the normal or standard approach, which I call top-down programming, and many other people probably do as well. And so to understand what that is, I think we can start with an example. So let's say you're programming in React or really anything, and you want to make a calendar component or widget or whatever, right? That you want to reuse other places. So you might start by going, okay, what are the different pieces to this calendar? So I have, the calendar as a whole. Maybe I have months that I need to switch between, and I have days that I need to switch between. And I, maybe have like a reset button or a way to like take you back to the current day, basic things like that. And then you might think like, oh, I might need to highlight days or like disable days or, those kind of features. So you think about all these features in your head, and then you're like, okay, how would I break that down into a manageable, programmable thing? And the standard approach is to take that sort of like visual understanding of it and break it down into components. So you'd be like, okay, I have my calendar component. Inside my calendar component, I have the month component. And inside that, I have a component for each of the days. So that's kind of what you think. Okay, and so then you go create new files with each of those things, and you might go through and be like, okay, so the day component is going to need these properties that get passed in from the parent, widget or component. And you just sort of break all this down, right? Like you might not do it so formally, but that's kind of how you think about it generally. That's what I call the top-down approach. It's taking a program and just trying to break it down into little pieces right from the get-go. Because we always hear things like, oh, you don't want to have like a massive component that just does everything, or like you can't work with that. It's not maintainable, and you don't want to have any, code duplication, right? So you're like, okay, I need to break things down into these components so I don't run into that. So it's what most people do, and I think it's actually the worst approach to do anything with programming, and we'll get into that more later. But yeah, so that's my definition sort of top-down programming. I'm curious what you think about that, Austin.
Yeah, I used to think like this as well, and I'm kind of a dreamer, a big picture person, but like I realized the more I focused on the big picture, the less I was actually able to do. And so, like, not just with like creating visual components, but like everything I do in my life, it's like I used to get so lost in the big picture that I wouldn't know how to take a single step and
Mm-hmm.
like get to that big picture. And so I started after we talked about bottom up programming, and I'd been kind of getting towards this with like doing really small commits, like breaking, like as software engineers, we
Mm-hmm.
break down problems to begin with, right? So like really working on breaking down things and just being like, all right, get something really like it doesn't matter if it's ugly, just get it working with the most simple thing and then iterate on that. And yeah, this whole bottoms up approach like really helped me get into that flow, and I'm much more productive.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. So yeah, I guess let's talk about it then. So what's the opposite of top down? That would be bottom up. So, sort of like Austin was touching on, what is bottom up? It is, not thinking about things from the top level view to start with. The way I think about it and the way I operate is if I was building this calendar component, I would have literally one component and I would put all of the code there. And I would worry like zero, not at all about abstractions, repeating myself. I don't worry about it. It's sort of like, I think of it like writing the first draft of a novel or a book or whatever. Like you're not supposed to, get hung up on like the grammar or whatever. All you need to do is get your ideas down. And so that's what I do. I build one component and I just try to make it work. And that's it. I don't worry about any of the rest. And to me, it works way better because there's nothing really to get blocked on. You're like, who cares if I should have made this a component? I'll worry about that later. Just make it work. I'll copy and paste this. Just make it work. And so that's the way that I start with bottom up programming. And we'll talk about like how you end up like with, maybe a more structured component or whatever in the end. But that's my first, start. I call it my first revision. So I end up with a working calendar. It does everything I need it to do, and it's all in this one function, and that's great in my opinion. It sounds, bad to a lot of people, and if they saw my PR for it or whatever, they'd be like, hey, you like copy and pasted code and stuff. And I'm like, yep, that's cool. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
so
if it's not messy, you probably like you put way too much time into creating something that, like you said, like pre-refactoring and trying to like standardize stuff. You don't really even know what you're making yet. You're just
exactly.
trying to get something work. And if you pre-factor, you're going to just be like, oh crap, I gotta undo that now. And then like, oh, it's no good, no good.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So like the next step, what I do in this process is I do like a what I call a second revision, which is looking for patterns and duplications. So in the top down approach, we started out at the beginning imagining the best way to break this down into small parts. With the bottom up approach, we look at the code that already exists and see where it makes sense to create abstractions or new components. So like I will go through this my huge component and be like, "Oh, okay, I'm duplicating code here, here and here. What are the common pieces of information between this code? Okay, those will be the props, and I can make a new component out of it. And it's really straightforward and it's incremental. I just create a new file, move my code over, add some props, plop it in, and nothing really changed. Everything just keeps working. With the top-down approach, you might run into a similar situation, like, oh, I ended up with code duplication I didn't expect. But trying to change that into something better is really complicated because you're like, oh no, now I need to pass this like prop data up like 3 levels and blah blah, blah like, and it just starts blocking you up, and it leads to code or to bugs, and like that's the thing we're trying to avoid. So instead of like imagining how it will be from the start, we just look at how it is and work based on that. And so I will do depending on how much I care about the quality of the code, I will do many of these revisions where I'll just start making one pass, then another pass, and I'll slowly, remove any duplication. And I also look for patterns like, oh, where am I doing something similar? And a great example might be in our calendar component, you had like, say, each individual day, right? Well, in the top-down approach, we made a day a component, and that sounds great, right? And maybe that works fine. But what if I'm looking at my bottom-up code and I'm like, oh, you know what? Each day is actually very similar to this button component that we already use everywhere else in the project. I wonder if there's some synergy there. And so I can look at, okay, how is my button implemented? How is my calendar day implemented? Maybe all I need is a tiny layer on top of a button. And now I've got, a much smaller code base because I didn't like duplicate a bunch of button code to make a day component. I'm reusing something that already exists. Or I might like make a new variant of a button that allows me to use it in this way. So that's what I often do, is not even restricting myself to just the code I wrote, but I try to look at it in terms of the whole project. So like, are there any patterns in this code that I see elsewhere? And so what I find is that allows me to reuse code a lot better and in a lot better way.
Yeah, definitely. Like if you do it top down, you have these like highly specialized components that
Yes.
are like really only used for that one case. But then you have the way you're approaching it, you have like you actually can build out like a component library that you can actually use instead of just this big mess of a like, oh, I can't reuse any of this. That's no fun.
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't scale. It doesn't scale.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. It's what you see in most code bases is these highly specialized components, and basically everything is its own new code. And at first, it's really fast. Like you really will pump stuff out, maybe. But long term, it is a horrible, horrible nightmare to maintain.
Yeah, I mean we're experiencing that in a project we work on right now. We have like made choices with the UI system that are not scaling at all, and we have to now go all the way back to the beginning to the drawing board to do what we should have done because we now like realize like how big this backpack of baggage is that we've been carrying around, and it's like, damn, this is slowing us down.
Hmm.
So we gotta speed it up. So it allows you to move
Yeah.
faster. It's actually based on, it's truly like lean and agile principles, like actually applied properly versus what it is made out to be
Yeah.
nowadays.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see how it ties in, like top down ties in really well with the way most companies are structured, which is top down. And the way teams work, and so people think of things like, okay, make a new calendar component. And so people think about it and approach it in that same way as like, okay, I'm just creating a calendar component. You don't think of it in terms of what makes up this calendar component. It's just the way that, things are sort of structured encourages this top-down approach, which doesn't lead to good results, in the long run. And I guess I'll say now that we've talked about some examples, I want to define bottom up a little bit better. So
Yeah, please do. I was confused at first. I thought you were like supposed to like sit with your head in the seat with your butt in the air and like try like upside down, and then it became more clear.
yeah.
So yeah, what is it exactly?
Yeah, I used to think that the two. No, actually, I didn't. Anyway, so
Everyone like we spread this paradigm and we go into like tech startups and everyone's upside down and you walk by and smack them on the butt. Hey, good work today. Woo!
yeah, I love it. I don't know if I'm smacking anyone on the butt, but I get the idea.
Make sure you use your hand sanitizer first to be COVID compliant, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so I actually, I think I sort of stumbled upon some of these ideas partially on my own. But what really helped make it clear was actually an essay by Paul Graham, I think it's just called Bottom Up Programming or something. But
Who's Paul?
so Paul Graham is like one of the founders of Y Combinator. But
Hmm.
anyways, Paul Graham wrote a lot of essays. He and published some books, I think, based on them. Also, yeah, he started one of the first like SaaS companies back in like 1995, basically. Um,
He did SaaS before there was SaaS.
yeah, exactly. Well, it's so Paul
The OG
Graham.
daddy.
Yeah, so I mean, if you know Lisp, you'll definitely know Paul Graham because he sort of evangelized it a lot. And yeah, so this essay was actually supposed to be evangelizing Lisp as well because in Lisp you can actually build new language primitives. So like how plus, addition or subtraction or whatever, things like that are language primitives. In Lisp, you can build those into your program. And so he was saying like, hey, if you sort of build your program up from the bottom where you're looking for these new primitives, you can start thinking in terms of those new primitives instead of in terms of all these like low level things all the time. And it will end up leading to smaller programs and easier to understand programs and that kind of thing. I don't remember, I haven't read the essay for a while if he talks about like getting mental blocks or whatever. But like that's what really got me thinking is like, you know what, that makes a ton of sense. Like if I can reduce the like sort of I don't know if reduce is the right word. If I can like think about my program in a more domain specific way and have the program be built in that way, I should have less bugs and less code, and it should be easier to think about and make sense. And Paul Graham talks a lot about it in terms of Lisp, but I realized like, hey, maybe you can't do exactly the same thing all the time in other languages that don't have as much power as Lisp, but like even in JavaScript, there's a ton of ways that we can, apply those same principles. And so I went and just applied it to everything I did and found, okay, hey, this actually works way better and has a lot more benefits to it than even what Paul Graham was talking about. And so really when I talk about bottom up programming to finally define it is it is building up the bottom to meet your domain. So whether that is just with functions or with React components or whatever that is, it's building primitives and systems up that match and are a good fit for the rest of your program. ultimately what I think of it as is I want to be thinking about, how a calendar works and operates, not whether or not I need to use a specific mapping function or whatever. Like, to me, those are low level details which can exist, but ultimately I want my program to not have to worry about that because I've built these underlying primitives that allow me to think in a higher level, basically.
Well, what I like about this whole topic is bottoms up programming. After we like got into this, I started like applying it to my life in a way. And like we started applying it to how we run our studio too. And we like have started setting up a lot of standard process documents and like places like workflow documents and places that we can run through routines. Like for example, the podcast notes, we have like a template where it has everything that we need to do to like generate podcasts more quickly, right? And we're like always iterating on these templates within our business. And then like you can take these concepts into like how you do your own business, right? And it's really cool like applying these things like multi-dimensionally.
Yeah, I didn't even think to put that on the notes here, but I actually do the same thing across a lot of areas in my life because I find that it's the exact same situation. We try to imagine the right solutions to things in our lives or across a group of people or within a community and apply those in a top down approach. Like, oh, there's this issue with the city we live in. The, mayor's going to decide this is the right solution and then make everyone do it. And I think you run
Right.
into a lot of the same problems. You don't, if instead you built up solutions from the bottom and worked with, people at the start from the bottom to come up with a good solution, you'll have a much better solution that works for everyone. And yeah, yeah, go on, Austin.
Well, I mean, you're making me like think there, yeah, there's like a hierarchy there, right?
Hmm.
And like we try to like start with the top and disseminate it down in like translation layers for like a long time to even disseminate down to where the bottom is. And then like the bottom is supposed to implement this when the top has no clue necessarily what the bottom need is actually doing,
Hmm.
actually interacting with how it functions in real life, right? And so then there's all these iterations of attempting to trickle down solutions that never work. But if you start at the bottom, like maybe it takes a little while to fill up that first bottom layer, but then you have all this like you of breadth perhaps being able to iterate up, boom, 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 like, and it can rapidly ascend. And actually, like, you don't build a house from the top down, like, that doesn't,
Right.
like, it, and we do it in everything. We're like, how do we build the chimney in the sky? And it's like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, that was a really great, yeah, visual example of it. Yeah, it's again like I don't know. This comes up a lot. It's like society, forcing itself upon the way we program. Like, this is the way society tries to do things, and it doesn't work there. But we don't care. We're just gonna try to apply it to programming anyways.
Yeah, it's so sad. Like, just, I think we talked about this in a previous episode, going like company to company through like your natural see the same stupid mistakes getting made over and over. Like, what are like, what? Like, how is this like? Luckily, a lot of these things have enough steam where it's like they just can't stop, and it's just like blundering along and working somehow. But it's like, how did they do this? Like, and like, why? And that's the thing. The like, there is some success in top down
Hmm.
because like it's the pattern, right? And everyone like accepts work naturally in that ecosystem. But it's like it doesn't mean that they're working well. like we've discussed plenty of examples just now.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think I could have said that better myself. That's very
I'm
true.
a good regurgitator, huh?
um, yeah, so that's like, obviously we both like bottom up, programming and bottom up in the real world. And I think for a good reason. Like we talked about, it allows you to sort of move forward in an organic, healthy way that leads to better things in the long run. And I wanted to talk about like sort of an example of this that might be more relevant to everybody on the channel, which is React. And to me, I see it as a form, like it's like React itself is a form of bottom up programming. I love the, the mustache.
Yeah, I was looking at myself and I was like, I want to look good for this podcast, even
you,
though no one can see me.
you look so much better now. Everyone, I hope you know. Yeah, so I think of React itself as being a solution that's sort of bottom up because you look at the way that we used to program before React and things like it, where we are directly manipulating the DOM. So when we went to come up with the solution, a lot of what we were doing was like, okay, I need to get a reference to the DOM and I need to make sure that this, text element is in sync with the state that's currently in my app. And to do that, I need to like update its, value anytime this changes. And if this changes, I also need to update its value. If the user edits it, I need to like sync it in. So that's how we were always thinking. And so we weren't thinking in terms of like, oh, when the user enters something in this text box, I want to have this action occur and do these things like at a higher level. We were thinking at a lower level because we had to, because we didn't have these primitives that allowed us to think at this higher level. So now React comes in and other things like it. React isn't the first thing like this, but React allows us to stop thinking about that lower level detail. It provided a bottom-up approach to working in applications. I don't necessarily think it's a perfect example in every way. So, I'm sure you can read into this and find areas where it's not bottom up or whatever, but like, I think it's a nice little example of like an area where it has been used and I think has made a big difference in what people are able to do.
If you do find a way, please reach out via the React show at Owl Creek Studio and let us know, and we would love to dissect it even more.
Yeah, I should probably reach out to the React show at owlcreek.studio because, I have some ideas.
This in from listener Thomas.
But yeah, I don't know what you think of that, Austin, if that makes sense to you. But like, I don't know. To me, I thought that was like a nice example people could probably identify with.
Well, like it makes me think about like right now, like I'm implementing some stuff with user management, and like the hooks that are available via that you can create and like working on trying to make the like bringing in the context and having like that ability to access a user just like plug and play, and then that's separated and it's able to like I'm able to scale out this user thing that can then be used everywhere. um I think React really, especially with like the new like with hooks and everything, has done a lot with that. And then like for example the next podcast show, which you can look forward to, we'll talk about Chakra UI, which like kind of enforces that in your UI library. So yeah, I think the ecosystem in React, like maybe like you said, it's not perfect, but it helps empower that paradigm.
Yeah, definitely. And I like how you brought up hooks because I think they are a really awesome tool for bottom up programming in a way that we didn't have with the class based components. So I do have my issues with hooks, but like I do think they're a really great tool that you can use because you can start building. So like this is another topic maybe entirely, but like one thing that really annoys me about a lot of React code bases is they tend to just use the basic hooks that come with React. Like they just use state everywhere, use effect everywhere, and there's very little thought into this sort of bottom up approach of creating new primitives. Like I want to be able to think in terms of, calendar hooks, instead of like worrying about
Mhm.
all these other details. And so I think like it's a really awesome tool that people can draw on now. Like when they're thinking about bottom up programming, they can be like, okay, I need to share this affecting code or whatever, or the state code or whatever, you know, oh, how can I do that? And you look at the other places in your code that, have similar patterns, and you can create new hooks. One we recently were just talking about on one of our projects was, well, I think it was called like use modal or modal or
Dude, did you read my mind? I was gonna
yeah.
ask you, like, I was literally like, maybe I incepted it, or I don't know, chicken and the egg there.
Yeah, well, like, we great minds think alike. They've always said, right? I didn't say that.
I guess
I heard
so.
it.
Yeah,
But yeah, so like, it's this really
your
simple.
mileage may vary.
Yeah, it's this really simple case where you're like, oh, we need to maintain some state for whether or not our modal is basically open or not open, and then trigger it opening. And so somebody made a hook called use modal that basically just has a use state inside of it and does that for you. And I feel like a lot of people don't do that. They just keep using use state inside their component, and everybody, just uses that raw, like, hooks provided by React. But it really changes the way you think about your program now that you have use modal. Because now, as somebody implementing it, you're not going, okay, every single time going, okay, I need to like maintain this state, so I need to like use state, and I need to like work my way through that. And it's not hard. We can all do it. But like, we're still thinking at that lower level. Whereas if you have use modal, you're just like, oh yeah, use modal, and plop things in, and you're good to go.
Right, so like, I mean, how many times have you set set open, set close,
Yeah.
and then you start doing it, and then you're like, oh, I need this instance, I need like a set open one, I need a set close one, then I need like maybe a toggle mode. Like after a little while, you have that same like 8 lines of code all throughout your project everywhere you use modal, instead of const brackets open close set close toggle
Yeah.
modal equals use modal, boom. Like
Yep.
it's like, I think the main thing about this type of programming is like, when you code in that way that is creating all this excess baggage, it's like death by 1,000 paper
Hmm.
cuts to your application, to your development processes. Like, you're wasting, maybe it's not a lot of time wasted, but think about all the times you set up that same state
Well,
management system on a use modal. That's like 10 to like 10 minutes maybe, that you literally could have turned into maybe 30
and
seconds, and it slows you down so much.
I think, yeah, I agree, but I think it's actually much worse than you say, because I think when you deal in those lower level details, the real thing that gets you are the bugs. And you're like, well, I'm not going to
Right.
have bugs on this, but you will if you do it enough times. Like you'll do something. And that's really, to me, the key is you're, instead of putting that in one place, you're, opening yourself up to doing it wrong. Or, and the way that it usually happens, I should be more clear about this, is somebody does it slightly different, right? So everybody has their own different idea of what to name the variables or whatever. And so the next person comes in and they don't realize that, and they use it wrong. And so it's really the big benefit here is you eliminate that. But we're talking about this as bottom-up programming. And so the way I think we did it right for a while, which was writing this low-level stuff and not worrying about it. And then, looking at, okay, it's a pattern, and we can fix this pattern with this new hook. But then I would do another revision and say, maybe there's places where it's not a modal, but we do something very similar where we open something up and it closes and we need to like trigger that and maintain its state. And I can guarantee you in most apps, there are other places where you do the same thing. So what I would do then is be like, aha, a pattern. What is this pattern? And so I might think more carefully
What
about
would you
this.
even call that? It's a Boolean toggle, like pretty or like use Boolean.
Yeah, so
Like,
I think I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I think you mentioned Chakra UI. I think it has a built-in for this exact thing. I forget what they call it, and yeah, I wish names are hard, and I would think about this more if I was doing it. But like, yeah, there's like a way you
I
could,
guess you'll just have to listen to the
yeah,
next podcast, and like, I guess you have to now.
yeah, if you want to know, or you could look it up,
Oh,
but.
they need to know now. They need to know.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So my point is like that is what bottom up programming is going through and finding those patterns and just progressively making it better in that way. And so that you end up thinking in terms of these higher level, I don't want components is too tricky in this context. Higher level items and primitives and like again, I want to say like we talked about this project and how we sort of took the top-down approach and how that created a lot of problems. I don't know if I should say we, the team, some of the people on the team, they took this approach. So I
So
would
you
never
just
do that.
removed yourself from that.
Yeah, I would never do
You did
that.
it without saying they. That was good. I don't know if I'd say we, but some people.
I mean,
Because it
yeah.
doesn't necessarily exclude yourself. You never committed to excluding yourself, but that was good. I like that
It's
verbiage.
Well, it's true. In some cases, I did do it because that was the expectation. Not that I wanted to. I will make an admission
You
here.
might be a good lawyer, man. Like,
Yeah, well, I don't know. I might be a bad lawyer for other reasons, but yeah.
mhm.
um, so yeah, I think like just sort of to like recap, I want to like be really clear about like the way I operate is I just write code and I don't worry about all of this. And I guess, to be even more clear than I don't know why I have to say it this way, but anyways, like, maybe I am writing this big, component for the calendar. Maybe when I'm writing it, I realize right away that a button is the like right fit for a day. There's nothing wrong with using that because you're using something that's a generic component in this fashion. So I don't think there's anything wrong with incorporating these other primitives right away. In fact, that's what you should do. You should be right from the get-go incorporating things you've already created that are bottom up. Now, it's just
Right.
important not to be thinking of it in terms of the top down, subdividing things. Instead, it's like, oh, I need days. I'll reach for my button component or whatever. Like you reach for your things that already exist. That's what we want to see. I'm not saying like just go write a bunch of raw code to start necessarily. But yeah, so I would start by doing that and leveraging any of the bottom up stuff I've already done. And then I would start doing, later, and I will probably submit that depending on the project as is and get that deployed. But then I'm also going to be working on revisions over time. And my general rule is for patterns and duplications, I try to look for 3 of them before I do any abstracting. So like in one client that we've worked with, I did this. I built 3 different large, like basically the same thing but slight differences. I just copy and pasted a gigantic component and I just put it in all these places. But it's worked out great because there were things I didn't expect. I'm like, oh, I didn't expect this difference between these components or whatever. And I would have totally done it wrong if I tried to like create an abstracted component first. Like that's what most people would do. They'd be like, okay, I know I'm going to have 3 of these. So I'm going to create my abstracted component first. And I would have done it wrong, absolutely. Even though I thought I understood everything, it never works that way. You always find things you did wrong. So I created
Well,
these.
that's where it's like really difficult to get yourself unstuck because
Mhm.
you built such a massive little like this Lego piece goes on differently and it looks the entire thing, and then you have to like do what you should have done from the beginning, create a different version. It's like that's all right.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I do is I try to get at least 3 versions of something. And that number is significant because I find once you've reached the third version, you're probably onto something, onto some pattern or whatever. If you're at 2, you might be, it might not. Like the third version might be different.
50-50, man.
Yeah. Well, the third version might be different in ways you didn't expect again. And so you're sort of prematurely, creating your abstractions. And so this is like my way of figuring out the right abstraction is I wait for 3. And so that's what I'll do. I'll go through in my revisions and be like, okay, I see this pattern at least 3 times. I see this code duplicate at least 3 times. How would it be best to abstract it? And it's just so much easier when you're like, oh, I have 3 instances. I could see exactly how to abstract it, and then you just go and do it. So that's the way that I work, and I find that I just literally don't run into these mental blocks very often. I don't want to say never, and I think, initially it took a long time before I was able to not really run into them, and I was really able to start thinking in this manner. But I definitely think it helps with that. And I also think, it leads to less code in the long run. Like, Austin said, the top-down approach, we get a bunch of specialized components that if you actually look at them, usually have tons of like patterns that get duplicated. Not necessarily code, because usually people are like making it so the code itself isn't duplicated, but it's the same pattern. And so you end up with tons and tons of code that you really don't need. If you had programmed bottom up, you would have ended up with less code. I think it's easier to like reason about the code when you're looking at the like higher level concepts like we had talked about earlier. And I think it creates more composable code because things have organically grown into each other instead of being forced upon each other in like a top-down approach.
Yeah, I think it's all like everything we've said. It just leads to things working out better in the long run, and like all of these problems that we solve as programmers, as businesses, with life, it's like a Rubik's Cube, right? And the more that you create toolkits for yourself by building out from the bottom and then creating reusables that you can then iterate new bottoms with to be able to build more rapidly. It's like a Rubik's Cube that you figure out how to like solve the next one even faster and faster and faster, and then your efficiency just goes out the roof.
Yeah, I never think about the efficiency part, so I'm really glad you brought it up because I think it's definitely true.
Well, I mean, like right now, for example, I've a project we're working on with the like getting leads for like businesses, and then like being able to list and like work through a CRM, and there's like literally I've had like 10 people in different niches approach me, and I'm looking at, okay, I need to build tools at the very bottommost level that are full that can handle a variety of use cases like plug and play, and like it's creating all of these things that I'm building, but started simple and like made them responsible for their own functionality. I'm able to scale like multiple startups at the same time, and it's wild.
Yeah, I agree. That sounds like fun.
And so like yeah, so it's like how much time are you saving and becoming more efficient starting with like the foundation instead of like actually Vivian, there's at Fast AF, she sent me an article called like the oxymoron of data driven, and I'm gonna pull up that article really quick because it had some pretty pretty cool stuff where like nowadays everyone in Silicon Valley here or there, where building these big tech startups, they like get these ginormous mammoth data and machine learning driven like read this and that, like where's the right fit, and like none of them are really in like a that can compete with like the OGs like Mattel. They did research on these companies, and they were like, yeah, and pretty much the one question they asked, like, hey, how started and how like what made you guys succeed, and they just were like, I was playing around with a thing that I wanted to use, and other people liked it. That's like literally it. So it's like you just play around with something, iterate on it, gain traction, and continue to build. And like, how much time do you waste up front, like trying to build the mecca of all solutions, and you have gotten off the couch? You're just still sitting around waiting.
Yeah, it's something that I see basically all the time from engineers is like um, just trying to engineer the whole thing up front and think of all the possibilities, and you know they spend a lot of time building these solutions, and even beyond our like bottom up like benefits of less code or whatever, like you end up not even building the right thing because you thought you were going to have problems that you didn't end up having, and you had problems you didn't know you were going to have, you know?
Right, you're like, it's trying to do something in two places at once. You're here where you need to be starting, and you're trying to like finish the track down at the other end of the line, and you have no clue about like what the rivers or whatever between. And it's like, well, good. Those like in hindsight, like that's not gonna work. Like, so yeah, starting where you're at, just like take one like slice of the cake with the fork, and like that's how you eat, right? You just do one bite at a time, break down your problem one thing at a time, and then build on top of that.
Yeah, I will actually. It's a good segue to my drawing. I don't know if we'll be able to see it, but yeah, let me. Okay, so um, anyways, you can see like, well, if you could see it, you would see that on the top is like my sort of view of what top down looks like, and what you would notice is there's like different, so it has like layers, and there's different like sort of blocks connected to each other, right? What you'll notice is a lot of layers are like sort of connected by blocks that cross over multiple layers, and it just kind of looks like a sort of a mess. That's what I think happens with the top-down programming, is you have a lot of cross-cutting concerns or whatever. Now, if you could see the bottom, you'd see it's sort of like just built on a foundation of like repeatable building blocks. That's kind of like the way I imagine it. You end up with more, focus and more effort on the stuff at the bottom, but it leads to a much cleaner, leaner solution.
Right. So like the overlap from a bottom up approach, the overlap still occurs at the top, but instead of it being a process complicated, highly specialized thing, the overlap is something that is like highly works together. So it's like the overlap is messing with things, it's creating an interconnected web of speed getting up to the top.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the reason why I wanted to talk about that is because I think that's why you get those mental blocks. Because it's just that becomes really hard to reason about for our brains, and you get stuck. Um,
It's a foundation of spaghetti code. Like that's
yes.
how spaghetti code is created. And it's like that doesn't work because your brain is trying to go through that spaghetti. You're gonna throw up if you spin around too many times.
Exactly. That is that's so true. um,
Yeah.
uh,
I mean, literally, one of my a guy I work with right now, I'm trying to really get this through to him, and we're trying to stuff, and he literally like wrote me yesterday, like my brain hurts, and I'm like, dude, it's because we're trying to build this one little thing and come back to me with a freaking billion ideas. And I'm like, dude, We have one AP that we need to send an email from. That's all. And like I'm still waiting on that PR. And it's like, man, like you gotta just like one bite. Like don't try to do not gonna work. It never does.
Yeah. And I think it's actually interesting too because you see it in the development of a programmer is like when you're first learning how to program, at first it's like really hard and it might be kind of exciting, but you're kind of like, I have no idea what's going on. But then you get to this point where like you're like, I kind of get what's going on and it's really fun. And you just like start writing code and you don't really hit these blocks because nobody's put it into your head that you need to like worry about all this other stuff. So you're just like, yeah, hack it away, write your code. And eventually you're like, oh no, now it's a mess and I don't know what to do with it. And then everyone tells you, oh, you should have like engineered it all out ahead of time. And so then the next stage of, development is not very fun programming because you're like always trying to engineer everything out ahead of time and it's miserable. And so I think of it like that way. Like I want to put us back into, I said happier. That's what I mean by happier. Let's go back to that time where it was fun to program, where you just programmed and you didn't let all this other baggage, push you down and keep you from having a good time.
Yeah, I mean, really, think about like when you've ever hacked stuff together and made it work, and you hit the enter button, and the
Yeah.
console like executes, and there are no errors, and you're like, wow, like that's the best feeling ever. And I mean, yeah, sure, bottom up programming, it won't hit your roadblocks or your mental blocks, but when you hit them, you are able to back up quickly because you don't have this baggage you're carrying around. You're able to pivot rapidly and be able to move forward with small things. And those small iterations help you learn, like, oh, this is actually like how I can go. Like, I have so many paths still open to me that I can integrate intelligently instead of like trying to do all the paths at once. Like it allows you, instead of being like a mile wide and like a centimeter deep, you can go really deep on things and then build out your base from there, and you like build this like expansive thing that grows upon itself.
Yeah. Um, like I said at the beginning, I'm super excited about this, and all of that is why. Like, I feel like it makes programming just more fun, and I think it makes it better, but I also think it makes more fun, and I think that makes it better too, because like you'll want to write better code if you're having fun, I imagine, and that's like I don't know. If I could give you anything from this, it's that more than anything else. That like second level programmer or whatever, where you're just hacking, you're just having fun, you're getting that exhilaration from when it works. You're not worrying about all the other crap because honestly, it actually makes things worse. And so, yeah, that's my final opinion on the subject. You better do it this way or you're not going to be as happy and you're not going to write as good a code. What do you think, Austin?
I mean, it's a very dangerous way to think about it. Like our system wants people to just be like, hey, we have this big monolith like pre-planned out, have no just build it, be a code monkey. But if you start hacking again, you're gonna realize I sit on a gold mine of my own potential to make so many amazing things with my talents, and like you begin like thinking so much more creatively and become like who you really be. And like that's dangerous because like our egos so much powerful, like, and you can tap into it by programming this way and programming your life this way. It's really transformative.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're gonna wrap up the show now. I would love to hear from people about this topic. So that's
Please.
yeah, the React Show at Owl Creek Studio. I'm really passionate about this. It's something that I think could really transform a lot of people's lives as programmers and the industry in general. And so I know I have talked with people that don't agree with me that think they can do the top down approach and that it's better. I've heard everything in between, really. So I would love to have that conversation still and learn more about what other people think. And yeah, so definitely let us know. And, I don't know if I've mentioned this in a while. So if you're a new listener, I do have a book, Foundations of High Performance React. Which you can get if you check out our website, owlcreek.studio. You can, I think, do we still have a promotion for getting a discount on that, Austin? Or
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it still might be free. You gave me that Leanpub link, and if you sign up in the email, you will send
Yep.
you that promo code. And
Yep.
yeah, as of today, it is still, what is today? It is the Friday the 13th. So it may be the last day, so you better get in there quick.
Yeah. I mean, I like how we have no idea, but when it is. But yeah, so
Right.
I guess we're being honest here.
Well, that's the great thing is like it doesn't matter. We're trying
Yeah.
to like that trying to stuff, this hack stuff, this get bottoms up,
I love how you keep saying bottoms up.
right?
All right. Yeah. So I think we're gonna call it here. Bottom up programming wins, top down loses. And yeah, now you know why. I hope you go out and have some fun. It's been great having you, Austin.
You too, Thomas.
All right. See you all later.